Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the infinite versions of our universe. Okay. Let's start off at the beginning. Well, the beginning of what is our observable universe, which was the Big Bang that happened 13.8 billion years ago. This is when our observable universe was born, which is finite, but the universe itself, which our universe is a small part of, is infinite and could have been born infinite. Since we can put a timeline on when our universe came into existence, which is that 13.8 billion years we just talked about, we can place a timeline on the things in our own universe. Everything in our universe is finite. But beyond our universe and the stars and galaxies and matter and all of that sciencey stuff is the universe, which would lead us to believe that there are many more infinite universes that are just like our own, but that are beyond our knowledge because of the fact that the speed of light, as well as the beginning of ours, the Big Bang, is finite. If there is an infinite amount of universe out there, then it only seems reasonable to believe that the same sort of creation of our finite universe happened an infinite amount of times. In our number 9 spot today, we have infinite universes. Piggybacking off of that last point, we have the fact that there just might be even more universes. Like, not just more of our kind of universe, but more of the universe. The Big Bang started off our universe, but it was not the beginning of everything. The Big Bang, which we all know happened when? 13.8 billion years ago, was the first time the universe could be described as hot, dense, and full of matter and antimatter and radiation and all of that, but there was stuff going on before that happened. Prior to the Big Bang, there was a period of cosmic inflation. This inflation leads to the growing of space-time, and this means that if that period occurred for an infinite amount of time, there could be an infinite amount of universes that are all finite, and one of these universes happens to contain ours. Does that make sense? This video really is all a person needs to feel exceptionally small and very insignificant. In our number 8 spot today, we have daughter universes. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. Let's try and make this the universe where this video has the most likes. Let's do it. This one is just a theory about if there are multiple parallel universes that exist and what they contain. This is where the theory of daughter universes comes into play. It is possible that multiple universes may follow the theory of quantum mechanics, which is how subatomic particles behave. Following the laws of probability, the daughter universes happen when you are faced with a decision. In our reality, you make your decision and it plays out one way, but in the daughter universes, they would each involve you making every other decision you could have made in that moment, which would then lead to whatever outcome that decision would have ended up leading to. This just means that there may be a universe for the opposite of every decision you've ever made in your life, and one for every decision anyone has ever made. How likely is this? I'm not sure, but if we ever find a way to jump to other universes, there goes the days of regret. In our number 7 spot today, we have bubble universes. For this one, we need to imagine our universe as a bubble, which it kind of is. The swelling bubble of our universe is just one bubble among many. Well, as we all now know, it is possibly just one among an infinite amount, all of which are swelling and expanding. All these bubbles make up the multiverse. This itself is of course just a theory that was made in an attempt to understand the origins and beginnings of our universe, but now it is being researched further. Physicists have begun studies on how and when universes might collide and bubble up together. I do understand that this is not concrete proof or evidence, but we wouldn't be researching it if it wasn't a possibility. This research could potentially lead us in the direction where we get to see some real proof, or at the very least, give us a better understanding into the theories of how multiple universes exist and how they could potentially interact with one another. In our number 6 spot today, we have the lack of evidence. This evidence is more so about the lack of evidence there is to say that the multiverse doesn't exist. Many scientists find the idea of the multiverse alarming or even unscientific because of the fact that there's no way for us to test for it. There is no way to make predictions that fall in line with data, and no way to really verify its existence, whether it's one parallel universe or an infinite amount. But there isn't really any evidence or data to support the theory that we are the only universe that exists. If our universe was created basically out of happenstance, what could stop another universe from being created at the same time or out of a similar happenstance? The idea and theory of the multiverse itself is relatively quite young and new, so it is possible that we will find the evidence to persuade most of us to one side or another, but as of right now, anything is possible. And maybe in another parallel universe, we already know all about the existence of this one. Maybe there's another me watching me make this video being like, oh, you don't know anything. In our number 5 spot today, we have the cold spot. The cold spot was first discovered in 2004, and it is basically just what it sounds like. It's an area in the universe that is slightly colder than that surrounding it. And when I say slightly, I really do mean very slightly. But when I call it an area, I'm talking about a huge one, as it is around 1.8 billion light years across. It was first believed that this area may be colder due to a lack of galaxies, but a newer study suggested that that is not possible, which led researchers down a different path in search of new theories as to why the cold spot exists. One of the most exciting is the theory that this may have occurred due to a collision between our universe and another bubble universe. A bubble universe is what we just spoke about in the last part, and they make up the multiverse, which would be the uncountable realms that all sit side by side, but that are in higher dimensions than our senses are able to interpret. This, of course, is a theory, and it will require a lot of time and research before we can say for certain, but it truly is kind of crazy to think that a huge, colder area of the universe could be due to a bump-in with another universe entirely. In our number 4 spot today, we have the CMB. After the Big Bang, it took around 300,000 years for things to cool down enough in order to allow atoms to form and to allow light to travel freely. This was known as the recombination, and during this time, that is when the cosmic microwave background began. The CMB is electromagnetic radiation that fills all of space, and while the space in between stars and planets and such may seem to be completely dark, the CMB is there and can sometimes, through sensitive enough technology, be seen as a kind of glow. So, how does this play into what we're talking about today? Well, scientists noticed a sort of bruise on the CMB during research, which left them wondering why. This is what led to this next parallel universe theory. If our universes are all like bubbles and one bumps into the other, it's possible that they may merge, even just for a second. This could cause some parts of one universe to spill into the other before eventually parting ways again, but this collision surely would leave some sort of a mark. And that mark just may be the bruise we saw in the CMB. In our number 3 spot today, we have the CMB Part 2. So you know what the CMB is now, and there's another thing we are looking for in it that might give us a sign of the multiverse. We thought we found evidence of this back in 2014, but it may have been a false detection, but we continue to look. Gravitational waves, which are ripples in space and time, are what we are looking for right now. The waves would have been left over from the Big Bang, and they could be putting tiny curls into the CMB. If found, this would prove the theory of cosmic inflation, which we discussed close to the beginning of this video in number 9, which would then lead us to the creation of multiple universes. It's all linked together in the most insane ways, but the universe is very cool and very complex. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Mandela effect. So, thinking about what we just talked about with the bruise and the CMB, and if our bubble universes really did collide with some other universe, and they had a moment where they may have been interconnected in some way, then this would explain the Mandela effect. If you don't know, the Mandela effect began being widely recognized when people began to swear that they could remember Nelson Mandela passing away in the 1980s. This is of course weird since he actually passed away in 2013. This time discrepancy had people obviously confused, and it has happened with many other things such as the Berenstain Bears, the movie Kazam, and honestly a whole bunch of things. There are many theories as to why the Mandela effect happens, and one of them certainly is the belief in multiple universes and some sort of crossover happening between the two. This, coupled with the possibility of colliding universes, is hard to comprehend, but it does kind of make sense. In our number 1 spot today, we have the strange particle. This might be the most concrete evidence, but we still don't really know what it means. This evidence came to us originally in 2016, but it took a few years for it to be interpreted in the way that might suggest the potential of a parallel universe. During experiments and research in the Antarctic, researchers captured what seemed to be the signal of a high-energy particle. This would be all well and fine, except for the fact that instead of coming down from above, this particle seemed to be exploding out of of the ground. Despite multiple attempts to explain why the signal was appearing this way, scientists were left with not a lot of options, and one of those has to do with the fact that this strange particle just may be proof of another parallel universe that is both exceptionally similar but also the complete opposite of our own. In order to explain this particle, there would need to be the existence of another universe that was created during the same Big Bang that created our own and exists in parallel with ours. But this universe would have to be a mirror of our own, where left is right and right is left and positive is negative and time runs backwards. It's both the most simple and most complex idea that all started with one tiny, strange particle.
Alright, at number 10, we're gonna be kicking off this list with the multiverse theory. If anyone at home is not a fan of science or has never picked up a comic book, then you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Information on this topic goes deeper than a fat kid in a ball pit, so I'm gonna give you the Cole's notes on this. Since 1957, when physicist Hugh Everett first suggested it, scientists have proposed the idea that we could be living in an infinite landscape of universes. There are a ton of theories on how this multiverse is composed, and I am not smart enough to break them all down for you, but I'll give you one example. A common idea is that there's a landscape of universes which are flat and go on forever, with universes sitting beside each other. Because this landscape is infinite, you can have universes that are drastically different. There could be universes where superheroes are real, and people read comic books about ordinary people to try and escape the stress of their super-filled life. And there could be universes that are so similar to ours but slightly off. Like you could have blonde hair instead of brown hair, or Twinkies could be healthy.
With that tragic performance from Che, now coming in at number 9 are the Crossroads. So back in November of 1986, Pedro Oliva Ramirez was making his way from Sevilla to his home in Alcalá de Guadaira. I hope I said that right. As he was turning a corner, he found himself on a 6-lane highway that had never been on the route before. Either way, he hadn't done the journey for a while, so he assumed it could have been new. He continued down the highway, but he started seeing weird things like 20-story housing units, 2-feet-high grass bordering the highway, and just unidentified metallic structures. After finally clocking something was off, he suddenly felt hot as hell in the car and started hearing voices in the distance, one of them which was telling him he was in another country in a different hemisphere. An hour into the drive to seemingly nowhere, Pedro finally gets to a sign pointing 3 ways. We have Malaga, Sevilla, and Alcalá. Hope I said that right, I probably didn't. He took the Sevilla detour, and 5 minutes later he was outside of his house in Alcalá de Guadaira, which literally wasn't even possible because he took the route which would have taken him back the way he came, meaning further away from his house. Like, how did man like Pedro drive 3 hours to a sign and then end up back at home within 5 minutes? He even tried retracing his route but never found the crossroad or 6-lane highway again. And a 6-lane highway going missing, that is a big deal, you guys.
At number 8 we have deja vu, that feeling when you swear you've seen something before, like you can feel it in your bones. Some people think it could be your instincts telling you what's going to happen, maybe like a spidey sense. Maybe we all have spidey sense, we just don't know how to use it yet. Where other people say it's a delay in the communication between your left and right side of your brain. It's like when you're in a conversation with a group of people and you say something, then someone in the group says the exact same thing that you just said, and you're like, you never listened to me, you're being a bad friend. But what if it's none of these things? What if it's you tapping into the frequency of another universe for just a moment? If parallel universe theory is right, there could be infinite universes. So there could be a universe exactly like this one, but just a little bit ahead. Deja vu could be you getting a glimpse into this space for a moment, and then returning back to our reality. This was suggested by physicist Michio Kaku in his book Parallel Worlds. Maybe every time you feel like you've been somewhere before, it's another version of you that has been, and for a brief moment you're connecting to them. If I could tap into this ability, I would make so much money gambling.
Filling on number 7 slot is Lisbia. So back in 1905, a man was caught by police in Paris for attempting to steal a loaf of bread. And I mean, geez, you guys, it's just bread, just let him have it. Cut the man some slack. They ended up taking him to the station and questioning him, and they soon realized he couldn't speak a language. He didn't understand or speak French. He spoke something that sounded sounded like Esperanto but wasn't and had different grammar to it. After trying to communicate with him for hours, they finally found a way to ask him where he was from, to which he replied Lisbia. And at the time, the police just thought that was his way of saying he was from Lisbon, but then he didn't understand or speak Portuguese, which sus, very sus. But again, it's fine because he could have been from Lisbon but been brought up somewhere else and never learned the language. Like, it is fine, I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Strange man. But then, when given a map of Portugal, he had no clue what he was looking at whatsoever, so the officers eventually realized the man meant Lisbia was a country. No one knows what happened to the man or where he went, but maybe he just crossed over back to his universe and made his way back to Lisbia. I don't know. Can I get a visa? I'd like one.
For number 6, we have strange artifacts. There have been items that are still puzzling archaeologists as to where they have come from and how old they are. It's like when you wake up after a blackout and you find a half-eaten, uncooked frozen pizza on your floor, and you have 30 text messages sent out to your ex and you're like, what happened last night? Well, this is kinda like that, but with more science. One of the best examples of this is the London hammer. It was discovered in 1936 and it seems to be a man-made iron hammer, but it was found in a mound of rock that's over 400 million years old. And I might be wrong about this, but I don't think there was any hammers back 400 million years ago. How did a human tool work its way all the way back to before the dinosaurs? Perhaps it was blasted through a wormhole from another dimension. Hopefully not with the guy who made it still holding on to it. One minute you're blacksmithing a sword, and the next you're getting devoured by an 8-foot tall centipede. There was also the blue rock that was discovered in Sierra Leone. This rock was sent to research labs around the world, but no one was able to identify its origin or link it to any other known rocks.
Coming in at number 5 are the Beatles, and this one is debatable because it really comes down to whether we want to believe this person or not, so let's just go with it. So back in 2009, James Richards was driving home in California with his dog. We love a good doggo appearance. You are a good boy. Don't let anybody tell you different. Now he ends up pulling over because the dog has to pee, and we all know dogs have 3-second attention spans, so off it goes chasing a rabbit. Now James springs into action and starts chasing after her, but trips and hits his head on a rock and ends up unconscious. Like, already this is sound like a very bad remake of Alice in Wonderland without the hallucinogenics, so what is going on here? Now when James finally woke up, he was next to an odd machine and a man called Jonas who claimed he found his body while on a work trip for the interdimensional travel agency that he worked for. Do you have openings, Jonas? Can I apply? What do you need? What do you need for the CV? I'm there for it. Either way, they end up talking for absolutely ages and start discussing the differences in pop culture, because that's apparently the number one thing you want to know about a parallel universe, like not world leaders or climate change, pop culture. Guess I'm a nerd. Either way, James ended up finding out that in Jonas's universe or dimension, the Beatles also existed. They were all still alive and they were all making music. And I know anyone can say that, but Jonas even gave him a cassette called Everyday Chemistry, which had Beatles songs on it that never existed in our dimension. Those songs are actually on the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com if you do want to check them out, but damn Jonas, you have my attention now.
Alright, at number 4 we have the Mary Celeste. This one has been baffling people for centuries. It's one of the greatest missing person stories of all time. It was back in 1872 when the Mary Celeste set sail. It was a cargo ship packed with booze and it never made it to its destination. It was found off the coast of Portugal with its entire crew missing. Not only that, but the cargo was intact, so they weren't attacked by pirates. The crew still had their belongings on board, so it was not likely that they left by their own will. There's a chance that the whole crew went mad and jumped overboard, or a portal from another dimension opened up and they all got sucked into a different universe. There could have been a bunch of dudes from the 17th century running around in a futuristic world. It would have been like every primetime show from the 90s with a time travel plot. They're from the past, but now they're in the future. What will they do? Find out watching Anchored in Time, 8 p.m. on Fox.
Filling our number 3 slot is the wrong Riverside. This one follows a woman called Carol Chase McElhaney who is driving from San Bernardino to Perris, California. Now on her way there, she passed a sign for Riverside, which is where she grew up, so she decided to make the pit stop there to relive her childhood and have some nostalgic vibes, because we all love a cheeky nostalgic vibe, don't we? She started driving to the street she grew up on, but her old house was nowhere to be found, and none of the houses were recognizable to her at all. And it wasn't like everything had been bulldozed over and reconstructed, it just wasn't the same. Straight up, it was different. Freaked out, Carol drove to her grandma's old street to find that that was looking different as well. She then went to the cemetery where both her grandparents were buried to find no cemetery at all, but a fenced up lot with weeds everywhere in its place. At this point, Carol was like, am I being punked? Where is Ashton Kutcher? Like, is he gonna come out? As a final grasp at sanity, she went to University Avenue, a street where there were usually restaurants and hotels, but now there was just a bunch of graffiti and run-down buildings, and the people there were just off. No one was smiling, they were all wearing black, and Carol was getting the feeling that if she spoke to any of them, she'd be stuck in that place forever. But our girl did not give up there. She spent the next few hours trying to find something from her past in Riverside, and when she came up short, she finally went home. Years later, Carol's father died and was going to be buried at the same cemetery in Riverside, and when Carol arrived in town, everything was how it was from when she was young. So how did she happen upon a Riverside from a different dimension that was just bad, and now she's back in the regular one? I don't get it. I don't get it.
And at number 2, we have the cold spot. When you flip your pillow over and it's cold on the other side, that's because there's a small amount of cold radiation buildup on the other side of your pillow from a parallel universe. That thing I just said, that is completely made up. Cold radiation? I'm an idiot. The cold spot is actually an area in our universe that is 1.8 billion light years away. Through what's called microwave background mapping, we've been able to map the cosmic rays in the universe possibly back to the Big Bang. Through this technology, scientists were able to locate this cold spot. The reason this massive field was colder was because it had 20% less mass in it than it should. Why does this area have less mass? Well, because it was just hot girl summer. Don't you remember? Sorry if this cold spot is too skinny for you. Well, actually, some scientists think that this could be from another universe crashing into ours. The force of these universes colliding caused a massive amount of energy to fly out, thus making the area colder. This could be the doorway into another universe where the laws of physics are completely different from what we understand. Now you just need to make the 1.8 billion light year trip to get there.
And finally, at number 1 is the interdimensional tunnel. Now this story actually came from the book Hunt for the Skinwalker, and this particular story is about the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Now this ranch is infamous for strange happenings. People who've spent the night there have seen things they don't even know how to talk about or explain, so how the hell am I meant to tell you guys about them? I can't. Well, in this book, a hunter that the author met described seeing an interdimensional tunnel open up on the ranch. He saw it through his binoculars, and initially it just looked like a bright yellow circle, but it started getting deeper and deeper, and that wasn't even the worst part. Then a huge faceless creature crawled out of the circle and then disappeared into the woods, and mind you, this massive shining portal was still open for business and ready to pump out more faceless monsters. Like, are we just gonna push that under the rug? I guess so. The hunter left the area ASAP Rocky and never went back there, but he's been utterly convinced ever since that tunnel or portal was to another dimension or universe, and honey, I believe you. You're preaching to the converted.
Starting off this countdown, we have SpongeBob. Who here is a fan of the sponge that lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants. So if you answered yes, then have you seen the 2004 SpongeBob movie? The one where the two goofy goobers, SpongeBob and Patrick, set out to return King Neptune's crown to save Mr. Krabs, and then Plankton tries to take over and yeah. Well, if you've seen this, then in one of the final scenes, there's this whole musical number where SpongeBob rocks out to Goofy Goober. At one point, he bursts into a wizard outfit in white boots while rocking on a guitar. Well, take a look at this image. Do you remember SpongeBob playing on a white electric guitar or a weird peanut one? Let me know. I remember him holding a white electric guitar, but apparently that's not right, and he always had a peanut guitar. No, just no, that's not right. We fully switched universes because SpongeBob never had that guitar, I swear. Moving on to number 9, we have Cheez-Its. But apparently, that tasty cheese cracker is not called Cheez-Its, it's Cheez-It. Either I've been saying it wrong my entire life, or this is proof that we live in a parallel universe. Like, do you remember it being Cheez-It or Cheez-Its? Because honestly, Cheez-It doesn't make sense to me. It needs to be plural because there's more than just one cracker in the box. Now I'm just getting mad here, but someone's out there playing with us, I swear. Moving on, at number 8, we have these circle clouds. Ever wondered what life is like in another universe? Well, they might just have circular clouds. Yeah, you heard me. Look at this real image of a circular cloud. Honestly, if I saw that, I would panic thinking that the end is near. Like, it's cool, but also, it's not right. Like, that's a glitch in the Matrix or something. Mother Nature is glitching. Or maybe that's what normal clouds look like in a parallel universe. Who knows at this point? In our 7th spot, we have the twins. Except the guys in this photo aren't twins. They're not even related. Yet they somehow dressed up in identical outfits and appeared at the same place, both reading newspapers. How creepy is that? Like, they even have the same haircut and hairline. Like, what is going on? I mean, the sweater is identical, same brand and logo and color. What are the odds? The only difference is that the man on the left is wearing black socks and the man on the right is wearing white socks. One of them is from a parallel universe for sure. It's the same dude, just our universe is glitching or merging with other universes or something like that. Coming in at number 6, we have the green KFC. So we all know that the KFC colors are red and white, right? Well, not at this KFC location. Since when does KFC have a green building? Hell no, that makes me uncomfortable. Even Colonel Sanders is wearing a green apron thing instead of a red one. That's not normal. That KFC is in another universe, I swear. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the photo glitch. Okay, someone needs to explain this photo to me. It's not edited at all. The girl just somehow appeared to be gray in the photo. Like, it looks fake, am I right? How is that possible? Unless her goal was to be a gray Santa. This one just hurts my brain. Like, if anyone can genuinely explain this photo, then let me know in the comments below. Like, how did she appear colorless when everyone else in the photo is in color? I feel like I'm tripping out. Moving on, at number 4, we have C-3PO. Who here is a fan of Star Wars? Hit that thumbs up button if you are. Well, a lot of die-hard fans were shook when they found out that C-3PO does not have an entirely gold body. That's right, apparently he's always had one silver leg. Okay, then explain this to me. How come when I was little, I had a C-3PO figurine that had 2 gold legs, okay? Someone explain that to me. What do you remember though? Apparently, a ton of fans just remember C-3PO being entirely golds. So, is our memory failing us, or are we universe jumping? In our 3rd spot, we have the Berenstain Bears. Okay, disclaimer. Buckle your seatbelts because I'm about to get heated and passionate for this one. So, do you remember the classic kids book being the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstain Bears? Because I remember it being the Berenstain Bears, spelled S-T-E-I-N. But no, I've been living a life of lies and deceit because apparently it's always been the Berenstain Bears. Stain, S-T-A-I-N. What? But I'm not the only one. Thousands of others remember it being the Berenstain Bears. So, theory goes that there are parallel universes out there. In this case, we have the Steen universe and the Stain universe. We lived in the Steen universe during the 90s when the books were out, but then later on, we somehow shifted into the Stain universe. Somehow, the universe ended up overlapping with ours, which is why we remember the Steen books, because they were real, but just in another universe. It's just driving me insane. Like, it was the Berenstain Bears. Okay, why would it be Stain? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, okay? Like if you agree. And at number 2, we have the Looney Tunes. Here's another one that will drive you mad. Or should I say, drive you loony. Sorry, I'll stop with the dad jokes. But do you remember the classic cartoon being Looney Tunes, T-O-O-N-S, or Looney Tunes, T-U-N-E-S? I remember it being Tunes, spelled with 2 O's. And that makes sense because it's a cartoon. But no, apparently it's tunes, like a music tune, which makes no sense again. Hello, it's a cartoon, not a music tune. I just want to go back to the Toons universe, like the T-O-O-N-S universe, because everything just makes more sense there, okay? They probably don't have COVID there. Just saying. And in our number 1 spot today, we had the Mona Lisa. Okay, this one really tripped me out. But do you remember the Mona Lisa having a little smirk on her face or a serious face? I remember her always having a slight smirk. Not a huge smile, but just a little something something, you know? But in high school, I was taught that she was serious and she didn't smile in the portrait. But get this. In a movie from 1931, it shows the Mona Lisa smiling. This movie is called The Theft of the Mona Lisa. Here's a clip from it. Now, of course, they didn't use the real Mona Lisa for the film, but wouldn't you think that they would get an exact replica for the film? Meaning that she had a smile. Because why all of a sudden would they use a Mona Lisa where she's smiling? Unless back in the day she was smiling in the portrait, and then somehow we're now in a universe where in the painting she didn't smile. Okay? But that's not all. In a 1962 Looney Tunes episode titled Louvre Come Back to Me, we can also again see the Mona Lisa smiling.
I can tell you chaps one thing. It's not always easy to hold this smile.
In the clip, she literally says, I can tell you one thing. It's not always easy to hold a smile. Bam! It's just proof that at one point the Mona Lisa did have a smile. You see how worked up I get over this? Something's going on here. We're in a parallel universe. It's tripping me out.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the deep space radio bursts. Mystery fast radio bursts were discovered in 2007. These bursts flash for a micro instant but emit more energy than the sun does in 10,000 years. The high energy surges of long waves have been detected 18 times over the past 10 years, and one burst in 2012 recorded in Puerto Rico occurred numerous times in the same pattern. Okay, this is what it sounded like. After fierce debates and a lot of head scratching, the source of the sound was traced to a microgalaxy 3 billion light years away from Earth. A lot of theorists have concluded that the sound is a space signal from another world or a parallel universe looking to get in touch. Coming in at number 9, we have the man from Taurid. Were we sent a man from another parallel universe, or did he arrive via some kind of portal or vortex? Our story here stems back to 1954 when a man was detained at the Japanese border after arriving on a plane from Europe to Haneda Airport. The man said he was on his 3rd business trip to Japan that year, and he had a wallet filled with a mixture of currencies, seeming to verify his business traveller status. When he presented his passport, officials were absolutely baffled, asking where he was from. Now, the man, who primarily spoke French, said, "Taurid. Where is this mystery place?" He showed his passport again and the stamps that supported his travels. The only thing is, nobody had ever heard of Taurid. The company he was travelling to said that they'd never heard of him, and he was carrying a checkbook to a non-existent bank. When he was asked to point out Taurid on the map, he pointed to where Andorra is today and seemed confused and offended to be told that it's not a real country. He was detained in a hotel overnight while Japanese authorities decided what to do with him, but by morning he disappeared. Did he accidentally walk through a portal to another universe? Maybe. Coming in at number 8, we have the Bernstein-Bears phenomena. Also called the Mandela effect, the Bernstein-Bears phenomena claims to prove the existence of parallel universes with subtle differences. People vehemently claim that the Bernstein-Bears were spelled with an E and not an A, and honestly, I for one absolutely thought that the Looney Tunes were the Looney Tunes until I watched a video on the phenomena last year, and now I'm straight up convinced that I'm living in the wrong universe, as it is clearly Looney Tunes. They're cartoons. This new world doesn't make any sense. Some people out there are also adamant that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the late 1980s, which is more than just a slightly altered timeline. It's not just spellings here, this is a pretty major parallel universe event. Coming in at number 7, we have deja vu. Deja vu, a glitch in the Matrix, or a signal from a parallel universe. While both seem as likely as one another, it is thought by some that the weird moments where we feel like we've been or experienced something before are
actually signals that something key is happening in our parallel lives. Not only do some people believe parallel universes exist side by side, some people think they interact with one another in some way. According to Dr. Michio Kaku, an American futurist, deja vu occurs as a result of a person's ability to flip between universes. Others believe it is because we're vibrating in unison with the frequency of another universe that's parallel with our very own. Oh, I've gone cross-eyed. Coming in at number 6, we have the Lost Beatles album. A parallel universe may have given our world a gift in the form of a Lost Beatles album, Everyday Chemistry. This story goes that in 2009, a man called James Richards found himself accidentally in a parallel universe, as you do. Luckily, there was also a person from another parallel universe there, a man named Jonas. Now, Jonas was on a trans-dimensional tourism trip from the other Earth, and he told Richards that in his world, amongst other things, John Lennon was still alive and the Beatles never broke up. Richards then stole a copy of a later album never released by the band and returned with it to our Earth. What did he do with one of the most sought after pieces of music from a non-history that almost but never happened here? He uploaded it to the internet. Eagle-eared fans were absolutely having none of it though. They said the album is comprised of clever mashups from all of the Beatles' solo careers. Richards later said that even though in an alternate universe the Beatles hadn't broke up, that didn't mean their future music ideas disappeared. I'm not so sure about this one, but I would love to hear what Paul McCartney has to say about it. Paul, tell us, is it real? I guess you're living in another universe so you don't know, but I don't know. I feel like you'd be able to answer. Coming in at number 5, we have dreams. Could our dreams be signals from a parallel universe? Some say maybe. In a number of First Nations cultures in North and Central America, people believe that dreams allow us to walk planes in other dimensions. Their reasoning is that dreams take place in color and can include all of their senses. They think that when you're in a dream, you are in another world, perhaps a world you already exist in if you're doing something strange in your dream. Maybe it's a sign that actually you live a far stranger life somewhere else. Coming in at number 4, we have the bruise. Anyone else here bruised like a peach? Just me? Me? And the universe. In 2010, along with a team of researchers, Stephen Feeney of the University College in London announced that he had discovered patterns in the radiation background left over from the Big Bang. Now this seemed to suggest that our universe bumped into not 1, not 2, but 4 other universes and was left bruised. Okay, what is the plural of universes? Universi? Universi? Universi. Also, from the bruising, further researchers in California think that it is clear that this leads to some kind of like bubble universe theory, which maybe I can get on board with. Maybe Men in Black got it right when they imagined us all as marbles in a big bag. Coming into number 3, we have the cold spot. In 2004, astronomers found something that baffled them, an unusually cold area of space. The area is 1.8 billion light years across and much colder than its surroundings. The area also contained 10,000 less galaxies than in other areas of a similar size studied in space. A researcher from Durham University in the UK believed that the spot could be evidence of a multiverse. They said it seemed as if a parallel universe smashed into ours, affecting it like a car pile-up on the motorway would, only they're calling it a cosmic shunt. They believed the impact was so vast it pushed energy out from a big region of space, therefore creating the cold spot. It's hard to get your head around, but that is what they think. Coming in at number 2, we have City in the Sky. In October 2015, Chinese TV went wild when thousands of residents in 2 areas of the country reported seeing a huge floating city in the clouds. Puzzled onlookers saw skyscrapers in the clouds and believed that they were seeing a ghost city or the colliding of our reality with a parallel universe. The phenomenon occurred in both Guangdong and Jiangxi, with some believing it was the beginning of an alien invasion. The images were caught on camera for the world to see and promptly went viral across the rest of the globe. So what on Earth or above Earth is going on? Well, even though it looks like a city in the clouds to you and me, apparently it is an optical illusion called Fata Morgana, which is a natural mirage. So that is what a lot of scientists are saying anyway, but other people are convinced it's a sign of a parallel universe or even a window to another world. Finally, coming into number 1, we have black holes. The theory of loop quantum gravity suggests that there is no point of singularity in a black hole, rather they're simply folds in the universe. Everything we know about quantum physics tells us that information is never lost, that energy can't be created or destroyed, so perhaps black holes don't suck and destroy, maybe they suck and create. A lot of scientists are dabbling with the idea that black holes are indeed folds or portals to an older part of the universe. Professor Stephen Hawking gave a lecture in 2015 wherein he discussed how it may be possible to come out of the other side of a black hole. He said the hole would need to be large, and if it was rotating, it might have a passage to another universe. But you couldn't come back to our universe. Anyone want to take that one-way trip? I don't know if I do. So guys, are black holes portals to another universe? This seems like a good moment to mention our sister channel Life's Biggest Questions, which answers all kinds of questions, especially like that. We love a bit of black hole chat, so head on over there where you'll hear me, you'll hear Charlotte, you'll hear Jack. Good times.
At number 10 we have I flew in from Torrid. Going to another universe sounds good, but you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's going to be really simple. Maybe it's a universe where everything is the same but everyone's left-handed. Or maybe it's a reality where the Nazis won the war and O.J. Simpson leads a fighting force in America against the Nazi forces. Well, the man from Torrid probably wished he stayed back in his universe. It was 1954 and a plane just landed in Tokyo. Everyone was getting off and everything seemed normal. But then one dude halted everything. Custom officials ran out and started investigating this one guy. He had all his documents, but he was from a country that didn't exist. It was a place called Torrid. The man in question said that it was a very real place and that he had flown from Torrid to Japan many times. At first glance, this guy seemed to be a whack job, but then the crazy thing was that all his paperwork was legitimate. He had official stamps on his passport to back all of his stories and claimed that the country of Torrid was squeezed right in between France and Spain. The custom officials in Japan were stumped, and I understand why. There isn't anything in the training manual about how to deal with interdimensional travel. So they escorted him to a hotel and he was not allowed to leave until the problem was sorted out. 2 guards stood outside of his door and he was on the 15th floor, so there was no way for him to sneak out of the building. In the morning the guards went in to take him out for more questioning and the dude was gone. He disappeared like a fart in the wind, and that was the end of the story. I guess he didn't like how strict we were in our dimension. At number 9 we have the Beatles ain't dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed and there was a man named Jonas sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonas started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8 we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they've succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7 we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia, this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. never mess with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this, she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job, and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6, we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5, we have Interdimensional Cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4, we have What Road Is This? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alaca de Guadarira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alaca de Guadarira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3, we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out in what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2, we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually Twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot, we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light, but because of this bending of light, there is a chance that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension. Alright.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuesi forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2humfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quinton. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Torrid, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Torrid where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day when they went to collect the man, he he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Sakria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too.